Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Monday, the 17th of July, 2017. As promised, we're going to take a look at the distribution of the hurricane season, the climatology of when we're supposed to have hurricanes. And you can clearly see mid-September is the most active part, and we have this ramping up here. But that really doesn't start until the mid part of August, even around August 20th. A lot of people say August 15th, but not until the 20th does this peak really start to go up. And then it lasts for several weeks, and then we have another peak in October, followed by a third peak again in November. So where are we right now? Well, July, things are not supposed to be very busy at all, and we are right here in the mid part of July, the 17th, obviously here today. And if you notice the incidences of hurricanes down here in the yellow, not very much at all over the past 100 years, just a sprinkling of them. Why is that? Well, the base state of the Atlantic basin is just not ready yet during this time period here for sure, and it even takes a little longer than that for it to ramp up even more, which we just covered. So this area right through here, things are supposed to be quiet. In fact, the activity that we have seen this year, even though we haven't had any hurricanes yet in the Atlantic, has, I think, exceeded our expectations overall, especially with what we've had coming out of the main development region. We have your Saharan air layer outbreaks during this time period through here, and the pressures in the Atlantic down in the deep tropics are usually higher. Your trade winds are faster. The sea surface temperatures are still trying to warm up, and so that's why all of this is generally flat, and then all of a sudden you get this tremendous ramping up as we get into August, and I don't see that that'll be any different this year. And in fact, August and September will probably be like a track race, very, very, very busy. Wanted to take a quick look at the SOI. The El Nino Southern Oscillation is driven by this more or less. And look, the value for today is plus 13, and the overall indices over the last several weeks have come up significantly. Remember, June's average was -9, and the 30-day average right now is only minus 0.6. So we're not even a point negative. So the bottom line is we have seen some significant rises in the SOI. And what does that mean? Well, if we go over and look at the sea surface temperature anomaly map for today, when we see positive SOI readings, that means typically that the pressures are going to be lower way out in the western Pacific than they are here in the eastern Pacific, and then the net flow of air is going to be faster, high pressure to low pressure. This is a generalization, but basically this is how it works in a positive SOI regime, and that's what we're seeing. And so you can't get an El Nino to develop during a sustained positive SOI, and certainly not when you have ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs, and ups and downs of that SOI pattern. Negative SOIs for weeks at a time reverses that particular pressure pattern, and you get a warming of the Pacific. So that's not happening. The SOI nowhere near where it needs to be. So the El Nino for this season affecting the Atlantic basin is not happening. I can definitively say that at 100%. So that being said, we look at the state of the East Pacific here, and there's some warm pools and some cold pools and some neutral areas through here, so really that's not a big deal. This is a very big deal. The very warm main development region. If you follow Michael Lowry, who used to be at the Weather Channel, his work, he produces these amazing graphics. I got to ask him how he does that sometimes, because he showed one that indicated that the main development region is the warmest that it has been in 7 years. And you see it's all concentrated here, colder in the North Atlantic, and even up through the Gulf and Caribbean, the anomalies are on the plus side, and that is going to probably mean a very busy time in August and September. And even if we look at the weekly average from the Reynolds method, this is the weekly summary of the sea surface temperature anomalies. You can see this ring here of positive anomalies in the Atlantic, and even the Gulf of Mexico over the past week warmed up considerably with a couple of pockets right here and right here of 1 degree Celsius isotherms. Those are lines of equal temperature showing up. So the bottom line, no matter which method we look at, the Atlantic Basin is quite a bit warmer than it should be, and that's going to eventually cause the lid to come off. In the Pacific, we're going to go through this fairly quickly to get to what's going on in the Atlantic. Obviously, a few areas to watch. We do have Hurricane Fernanda out here. This is not going to be an issue. Even if this develops, probably not going to be an issue. And the same with these. They're all moving away from Mexico. So if you are in Mexico, we'll put a big check mark for you. Or I could draw a happy face, whatever you want. No issues. And hey, this is where it all matters. The SOI being positive, and maybe this isn't a connection, but in my brain, it makes sense. These are all going to be moving west, and that means there's strong high pressure out here, generally speaking. And so the easterlies are strong, and so we're not having an El Nino. Somewhat connected there. And of course, later in the season, when you get these troughs digging in to pull these guys out and bring them, and gals, you remember hurricanes do have female names, that's later in the season, August, September, and especially October. But for now, strong high pressure over the East Pac, driving everything generally westward, and so that's not going to be an issue. Now, looking at the quick satellite animation, I want to put your mind at ease if you're over here in Hawaii. Fernanda might try to come your way, generally speaking, but strong upper level winds in that area. Of course, that's what's happening now, but colder sea surface temperatures through here, a more stable air mass in place. Really, even if it made a beeline for the Big Island, by the time it got there, it would be nothing more than a few rain showers and some gusty winds, which, we'd have to be concerned with a little bit, but this is not going to come towards Hawaii as a hurricane. And here's your other disturbances trying to gather themselves in what is a very active Pacific period, kind of, what we're used to the last few years, and this will probably die down, and then the Atlantic will become busy as we get into August. Speaking of the Atlantic, here's what's happening, and I think the very first thing that should jump out, besides 95L down here, is this tremendous, huge air mass from Africa right through here, the Saharan air layer. You can see it on this visible shot as well as anything, and that is a very dominant feature, squashing development down here in the main development region and in the intertropical convergence zone. Yet, despite that, in the face of this amazing huge air mass, it's immense. Look, we're trying to get development. That just shows you the vigor of the tropical waves and the energy that is down here waiting. All this has to do is let up, and it's going to happen. The season will come to life, and we're going to have hurricanes developing. In fact, if the Saharan air layer had been practically non-existent this year, certainly TD4 would have gone on to become a hurricane and may have made its way over to the United States. What we call the hoopla storm from last week, which may or may not be here by now, I haven't been tracking it, that would have developed. And remember, it was just the dry air that squashed it. And, there was somewhat of that suppressed Kelvin wave, but, if you have 10 requirements that must be met, generally speaking, and 8 out of 10 are there, you can still get pretty good development. That's the way I look at it. But this one is a big squasher of development, and it's hard to overcome that dry air. So, the point is, had the Sal not been there this year, we would already be up to probably the F-named storm by now. So what do we have here with 95L? Well, there it is there. We're going to look at its close-up in a minute. Satellite view. We have another disturbance here that's trying to get its act together as well. So if we look at a close-up, Recon's going to fly out here and check it out. Very much appreciative of their work. This is moving fairly briskly, which makes sense because it's certainly south of a very deep layered ridge of high pressure over the Atlantic. And you can tell, it's trying. A nice band up here to the north and northwest, trying to get in over that circulation center, and Recon will go in and verify whether or not there is a closed low. There is organized persistent convection enough that this could be labeled a tropical depression. That's Barbados right there. And so the latitude, longitude are put on here. There's 10 degrees north, And so this is riding just north of there, between 10 and 11. So once again, you folks, and I'm going to back up here to the wider shot, in the Lesser Antilles specifically, the Windward Islands here from Barbados and points south, and maybe even St. Lucia, we'll see how large this gets. It's fairly small, dominated again by that Saharan air layer. It's not allowing it to sort of spread its wings and grow larger. They typically do that once they get out of the deep tropics, but that's a story for another day. But you guys down here, again, you're going to get more wind and rain and possible, maybe, near tropical storm conditions. So we're going to be watching this closely, and we'll obviously be updating this again tomorrow, if not later tonight. We'll see, especially what Recon says. And then as far as this other system, more than likely this will take a more northerly track and not be of any concern. But again, you guys down here in the Windward Islands, this is headed your way no matter what it does. Strong gusty winds and periods of very heavy rainfall from another trying to organize system. I mean, thank goodness for that Sal, right? Or you guys would just be hurricane weary, at least tropical storm weary by now. And you can see the energy with it. There's the vorticity. It's there. These are your vorticity signatures for the systems in the Pacific, and a pretty active area of energy now in the deep tropics. We're getting closer and closer. We're still in mid-July, though. Remember that. Remember where we are on that graph, that things are not supposed to be busy. So the fact that we have this, and we had TD4 recently, and then that other system that tried to go, but if not for the Sal, it would have. It's impressive, and I don't mean in a good way. So let's take a look at the models. This is the very latest GFS vorticity signature at 5,000 feet. The initial condition, kind of weak down here for 95L. This is the system behind it, which would be, if it organizes more, 96L. And then there, plain as day, is the very thick, dominant ridge sitting over the central Atlantic. And there's different layers of the atmosphere. This is the 850 millibar layer, which is roughly 5,000 feet up. And you can see, too, a pretty good band of pretty strong trades coming through here. And, the high is not abnormally far to the south, but as this starts to migrate more northward over time, then the pressures ease up down here. You get more convergence, the piling up of air, that's what that means. Think about a whole bunch of elephants, if you can imagine that, running as fast as they can, hundreds of them. And they're all going at the same speed with no problems at all, straight line. But so that's what we have now. Everything's just moving along fairly brisk. But once this moves north, naturally, as we get into August, the front line of those elephants trips and falls. What happens to the rest in the back? They all pile up, and you got a big old bad pile of elephants, right? Well, that's what happens in the tropics. The air piles up, and you get not elephants, but you get hurricanes. And that's going to probably be starting in August. So get ready when you see this. So let's go ahead and animate this, get away from my elephant analogy, and I'll show you what are we looking at here. Well, keep your eye on the vorticity, and it's right there, and right before the islands it tries to ramp up, but it's small, which is good. That means it won't affect a huge geographic area. And here's the other system, feeble as it may be, and then 95L dies in the Caribbean. Now what I want to do, I want to go back and I want to look at this particular run of the GFS, but I want to look at the larger resolution of the Western Atlantic here, because I want to show you something. We do have concerns in Jamaica. What's going to happen in Jamaica? Come on, everything's nice and slow today. And we'll do the same thing. We'll animate it out to 5 days, and we'll see the system coming in here from the right. Drawing it here. There we go. So keep your eyes over here. You know what? Let's make this go faster because we're going to be here all day. A few clicks of the button. Slide set. There it is. All right, so this is a loop, which is going to be helpful. So it comes through the Windward Islands here. So Jamaica's up here. Some other energy coming through. We see these greens. That's not rain necessarily, but that's energy in the atmosphere. So a potentially wet time, regardless of this system. And watch, it comes in here. We're at hour 120 now, so the loop's going to start over. Comes in here on the right. There's Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago down here. and you see the system, the center of vorticity, froze up on me there a second. It goes just south of Barbados, Jamaica, and Haiti. This goes south of you. So even Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, might be some showers and thunderstorms from this system, and then it ends up here in Central America, maybe to pop out on the other side. You never know. But what I want to point out, look at all this in here, all these wind barbs, 30 knots of trades blowing through there. It's kind of like when you have a mountain pass and the wind comes screaming between that mountain pass and it's higher. That this gradient through here of wind is really strong. High pressure up to the north and lower pressures down here. And through here you have this gradient, the big continent of South America, sort of this heat low down here that takes place. And that's not good for tropical development when you see that. So that's why I don't think Jamaica is going to have too much to worry about from this, and it should die a fairly quick death once in the Central and Western Caribbean. But again, right here, that's the target area, and you see the other system at the end of the 5 days ends up roughly in this vicinity. So not a real big problem, I don't think, but again, maybe tropical storm conditions for portions of the Windward Islands. We'll see. Stay tuned. Now, what does the Euro show? Well, this is the 0Z run. Unfortunately, the European and the GFS don't run at the same time well, they do, but they don't have outputs at the same time. And, of course, the GFS is completely different than the Euro. This is the initial condition on the European, and you're probably thinking, are you going to get burned again? Well, don't forget, the National Hurricane Center shows 50%. They're not all in either, I'll agree, and neither am I. I'm just showing you what the model shows. I'm not predicting squat. I'm just kind of showing you, what, like I said before, we're following the evidence, and we'll see where the evidence leads us. And sometimes it leads us astray, like it did last week. Nevertheless, there's the vorticity signature. It's got that pretty good at the initial condition. And so what happens? Well, here's 24 hours out in time. Nothing really to speak of. 48, nope. Maybe just a little bit of a reflection right there. So at least that matches up. And this is a small system. So the resolution of the European, as good as it is, sometimes these smaller systems it'll miss. And we do have to rely on the GFS and some of its vagaries to maybe pick up on these things. But anyway, if we go on through time, that's 48 hours. And finally at 72, again, if you have interest in Jamaica, right there, that's the energy with 95L down there. So really not a big deal for your area. And then at 96 hours and 120 hours, for the most part, everything is quiet in the tropics. So, I told you it was going to be long. Hopefully you learned something. We're up to date. 95L will have our attention. We'll see what's happening with it. Maybe later tonight. We'll just have to see. Could do another update depending on what the hurricane hunters find, especially if it becomes a tropical storm, which is not likely, but you never know. Otherwise, I'll certainly be back tomorrow at probably in the afternoon as well. All right? Well, that's it from me for today. Have a great rest of your Monday. I will be doing these every day now for the foreseeable future while we have activity to talk about. So that's good, I guess. So have a great rest of your Monday afternoon. I do appreciate you, as always, tuning in. I am Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com. We'll talk some more tomorrow.